Hey everybody, this is Phil Town.
And this is Danielle Town.
Welcome to the InvestED podcast, where we are deep into Warren Buffett style investing.
Oh, yes.
Kind of investing I've been doing for 40 years, the kind of investing Danielle's been doing for, 8 years now, I believe.
I don't know if I want to claim that because it has not been 8 full-time years.
That's true. We don't want to go for 8 part-time years?
Yeah, 8 part-time years sounds good. It's like
Whatever.
People, every now and then somebody will ask me how long I've lived in Switzerland, and I sort of am like, technically, I don't even actually know. I should know that, like 7 years. But it feels like 3 or 4 because I've spent the last 3 years like being in my house and like in the hospital and in the clinic and just like not experiencing much of life or doing the language or anything. So I'm kind of like, I think 4 years counts, like not 7. So that's how I feel about investing too. It's like, let's sort of like discount some of those years. But yeah, enough time definitely talking with you about this stuff that I would say those part-time years are quite regular, which is pretty cool. Like, there aren't a lot of things in life that you do every week for, what are we at, 8 years? 7 years? 8 years? We started this podcast right before I moved to Zurich, so.
I mean, it's 461 weeks.
61, yeah.
So that's way into 8 years for sure.
And so, so having this weekly discipline, I guess maybe we would call it, although it doesn't really feel like a discipline, but it feels like a nice little dip into the pond, has probably been the one thing I've ever done every week for that long. That's pretty cool to think about, actually.
It is really cool. And I think it's just because this style of investing is so rich and so simple all at the same time. Simple, but not easy. Mm-hmm. Really, really, you want to say it's very, very sophisticated in its simplicity.
Yeah,
if
I
could
think
say
that's
it like that.
A really nice phrase.
You know, like take a... Like
and
I've
it's one that makes
likened,
people be like, what the heck is that supposed to mean?
Yeah, well, it means like this.
Trying
like,
to sound fancy.
No, if you look at like a really nicely cut suit, not something by Versace, which, not to say they don't cut their suits nicely, they do, but not flashy, right? It's just that very sophisticated sort of Ralph Lauren purple label kind of things, just clean lines, not overstated, not looking for attention, just simple. But to do that is so difficult.
Well, as I've learned from watching The Great British Bake Off and Project Runway for many years, if you do the simple version of the task, it has to be done perfectly.
There you go.
Your hems have to be ironed. Your icing has to have no flaws. And if you can do it, then you win every time. But it's really hard to, like, because you can't cover things up with, like, whatever the equivalent metaphor we're using here, like a ruffle or something. You can't hide it with something thrown on. And so that's why it's appreciated when people do it really well. I mean, think of, like, again, just to stay with clothes, the Donna Karan, Calvin Klein aesthetic, like that was so special. And Ralph Lauren at the time, that was so special, American sportswear in fashion history, because it just wasn't being done simplicity wasn't being done in a beautiful way like that.
I want to just, now that we've scared everybody pretty well by saying how hard this must be, if we're comparing it to things which are very, very hard, like high fashion and so on, then I'm going to back that way, way, way down and say that this is not hard at all. When we're saying that it's sophisticated, what it means is that it requires a solid understanding of what you're doing in order that you don't step out of the boundaries of what you know how to do. You stay within those boundaries and you insist on getting the company to fit the requirements of a wonderful business that we have detailed endlessly here on this podcast. But you have to demand it of yourself, which means you have to be very patient and you have to be very confident. A lack of confidence is really the biggest problem here. And of course, as beginners, we always lack confidence. And so we're never quite sure. And so it feels always like, I don't know for sure. And so when we're putting sort of the boundaries on this thing, the boundaries that I've been teaching you for all these years, they're there for a reason. They're guardrails that, you can take them down, but they are guardrails. And if you stick with those guardrails, it's really quite hard to make a mistake. And the first guardrail is you actually understand this business. That's the first guardrail. And of course, that's a subjective guardrail. That one says,
well, that's...
wait a second. How do I know I understand this business? Okay, well, if you're asking that question, you don't understand the business.
Sort of, but that's why we ended up talking about the weather matrix and all that, because I think that's a legit... So without going back to that today, because we're going to talk about how Buffett addresses this issue today.
Yeah. So, well, I don't know if that's a good segue into this thing, but I will say that what that means is if you really are asking that question, I don't know if I really understand the business, then think about it like this. If you felt, because often we don't feel we're smart enough or whatever to do this kind of thing, and certainly Wall Street wants to tell us that we're not smart enough. But if you were to think, okay, well, could I own a laundromat in a small town?
Okay.
Could I buy and own a laundromat in a small town? And if the answer to that is no, I don't feel confident that I could do that, then let me go one step more simple. Could I buy and own a house in a small town and rent it?
And when you say could I, what you mean is like, do I have the capability to manage that particular
Not do I have the
ownership?
Money, but
Yeah.
Do I have the capability, that's well said, of actually handling the responsibility of owning a home, paying the taxes, upkeep as necessary to keep a tenant, a renter in there, collecting the money, right? Do I have that ability to do that, to figure out how much I should rent it for? And I think if you'll just trust yourself to the point where you say, yeah, I could do that, then that's the level of understanding that you need on a business. If you don't have that confidence, then you're not there yet. You need to just keep digging in. So it's like most people, I think, are pretty confident that they could rent the house. If they had the money, they could buy a house and rent it, and the world wouldn't come to a sudden end, and they'd lose all their money, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's on that level, and obviously, Warren Buffett is really, really brilliant and has a stable of something like 70 or 80 or 90 companies scattered across a ton of industries. And there's whole parts of the market that he doesn't put his toe into.
Totally.
So
totally.
You just have to, in order to do this simple thing, you really have to force yourself to dial it down to a point where you are focused on one business that you just absolutely love and want to understand, and you just keep digging until you understand it to the level of renting a house in your neighborhood.
Totally agree.
You're good to go.
I just think it's funny. It makes me laugh because I feel like we go around this merry-go-round like every 6 months or something, where one of us says it's simple but not easy, and then you're like, oh no, but I don't want to tell people it's not easy because that sounds like it's hard. So now I'm going to describe why it's not hard and it's actually totally easy. And then I'm like, it's actually not that easy. That's why we talk about it. And then you're like, okay, yeah, let's talk about it.
Yeah. But
and then we sort of go around that circle.
Then it's like saying, if you say, well, it's not that easy, then it's like saying, well, it's not that easy to rent a house. And I'd have to say, yeah, you're right. For some people, it's not easy to rent a house.
About what I was about to say. Exactly. Like, it's okay to say something's not that easy. Like, it's okay to learn things and practice them and have them be something that's not obvious right off the bat. That's very normal. And when you say something's not easy, that doesn't mean it's not possible to learn it like fairly quickly. So I think it's okay to say it's kind of maybe even hard for somebody. I mean, it was hard for me, but that's okay. Hard things usually bring the best results, like that's something that's useful for me to know. So,
I'm going to add one more thing too when you're done. Go ahead.
Go ahead. It's fine.
Well, I'm just adding one more thing, and that is I've been up snowboarding quite a bit. And I just want to point out that I started snowboarding. Well, I started skiing when I was like 12 years old. And then I started snowboarding when you decided you wanted to learn snowboarding. That was about 1995 or 96. So I've been snowboarding, what is that, 10, 20?
Almost 20 years.
Over 20 years. And the first thing I did when I came back here was to get an instructor. And snowboarding is so simple. I mean, you go from one edge to the other edge. And it's like, okay, push your toes down, lift your toes up. I mean, how hard could this be? And in fact, snowboarding
from one
is
edge
so
to the other edge.
snowboarding is so simple. I talked to the instructors in Jackson Hole about this. I asked them, from somebody that's never snowboarded in their lives to getting on black runs at Jackson Hole, which are double black anywhere else.
Yes.
How long for somebody that's well coordinated, they're a good athlete, that kind of thing? They said 5 days.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. For somebody who's well coordinated, good athlete, who's strong in the legs, I agree with that.
Okay, so we would have to agree that there's certainly a learning curve when it comes to snowboarding, but that you do learn fairly quickly. Even if it's not 5 days, you're going to learn much more quickly than, let's say, skiing to get on harder runs. And yet here I am. So point being, I've been doing this for a long time, so surely I know how to do it if you can learn it that fast. And the first thing I do when I come out here is get a coach. Because
tell me why. Yeah,
I want to get better, number one. And number two, I'm very not disciplined. And so if I'm left
those are
to my
not the
own
reasons I
devices,
expected.
Yeah, it's if I left to my own devices, I might not be willing to really put in the work and practice and try to get better. And if I even knew quite what to practice on at this level, right?
Well, that's what I thought you were going to say, that the reason was there's more to learn. There are details. There's nuance.
Absolutely. So, for example, I've been able to carve the board, on the toe side. Can't carve it very well on the heel side. And all the things that I try don't make me a better carver on the heel side. So that's the first thing I told this coach is, okay, I want a heel side carve. And so immediately we start looking at things like, your balance is staying over your front foot longer than it should. You need to start rotating your balance back. You need to rock into the toe side. You're on the toe side turn, rock into it a little bit, completely counterintuitive. Rock into that toe side, and it's going to set you up to rock back on your heel very quickly. Oh, also,
sick.
Begin the heel side turn while you're still going sideways on the hill. You're not even down the hill. Start the heel side turn sideways on the hill, and let the board radius take you around the corner.
That one's true, and you get the fastest turn ever when you do that, and you just get like whipped around. It's super intense when you get it right, to the point where it's a bit freaky. I've done that a couple times. That's a really good tip, that one.
So here's the point, is I've been doing this a long time, and I think probably anybody that's been doing this a long time would still benefit from having a coach. Tiger Woods has a coach, right? When he was playing at the top level of his game, he had a coach. And it's just like, okay, so clearly there's a place for help in doing anything, even simple things, even things you do pretty well, right? I snowboard down double black diamonds and backcountry deep powder, heliboarding. So I do it pretty well. Actually, in Jackson Hole, if anybody asks me if I do it pretty well, I'd tell them, no, I'm all right.
Yeah, definitely.
In Jackson Hole, if you say you do something pretty well, it means you're probably a candidate for the Olympic team.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It means you're in the Olympics.
Exactly.
Are you Shaun White? Okay, then I guess I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
well.
So you do X Games pretty much in Alaska. I see. Okay.
Yeah. It's just like the lower level X Games.
Right.
Yeah, and
So-
that's all totally true. Totally agree. Coach is very important. Outside perspective, very important. And I think also the way we got into this was talking about easy or hard. And I think it's a great metaphor because snowboarding, skiing, sports, you can say they're easy, and they are. You know, it's easy to play baseball. You pick up a baseball, you play baseball. Does that mean it's easy for somebody who's at a higher level? No, it's incredibly hard. It's incredibly hard to be at a high level in anything. So I think both things are true, and it's okay for investing long term. Rule 1, value investing. It's okay to say that can be hard sometimes, I think.
Sure.
Okay.
Now, I think that kind of takes us over to Warren's letter this year.
Yes.
Where he
I loved that he got into this basically for us. I was like,
did.
oh, he's writing about me.
He basically is saying, okay, look, I'm writing my letter for a certain person. And he decides to have that person actually in his mind. And so he picks a real person, and it happens to be his sister, Bertie, and is essentially saying that a CEO's letter should address the kinds of things that a reasonably intelligent person who is not a CPA, but understands the world a bit, would understand their business, would understand what you're doing. And so first thing is, okay, no other CEOs write that kind of letter. That's good to know. A handful do. But the rest of the CEOs in the world are so busy covering up their errors or the things that they don't want to tell you about that all they do is use their letters to just pat themselves on, or they don't even really pat themselves on the back. They pat all their people on the back on their CEO letter typically, and you just get whitewashed. You really can't tell a lot about what the company's doing.
It's
Very
a lot
rare
of,
CEO to
yay,
realize it
go
out.
us.
Yeah, because they're a
information
bunch of
about the future.
mercenaries. I mean, let's get real, right? The people who might tell you the truth are usually founders. They have a lot of money on the table, at the same side of the table you're on, in terms of their share ownership, and they're running the company, and they tend to be much more transparent in my experience than a mercenary CEO. I'm not saying it's bad to be a mercenary CEO. A lot of people strive for that from the time they go to
not
Harvard Business
implying
School.
that in any way.
Well, the problem is mercenary CEOs, like mercenaries everywhere, have as their prime concern themselves, not the company necessarily. They also know they're not going to be there that long. So why not make hay while the sun shines?
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe.
So anyway, I have my doubts about many mercenary CEOs. But the letter here.
Yeah. So to get into Bertie,
is
can I just say,
Bertie.
I love the way he could have said anything about this image he has of the person that he's writing this letter to. And so I think what he does say is so particular, and I appreciate it. So first he says, for openers, Bertie is smart and likes to challenge my thinking. Stop. Like, 1, his audience is smart. His audience has common sense, and his audience challenges what he's gonna say. Like, who says that? Nobody says that in a CEO letter. That's crazy. So the fact that he's putting that in there as his first line about his audience tells me that he knows everybody reading this is trying to find the holes, and he's aware of it, and he wants to tell us, hopefully, right? He wants to tell us the truth so that there aren't any holes.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
then he says a few more things, and then he says, kind of for Bertie's basic knowledge, he says, she understands many accounting terms, but she's not ready for a CPA exam. She follows business news. She reads the newspapers, but she's not an economic expert. She's sensible, and then he says, very sensible, instinctively knowing that pundits on TV should always be ignored, because if they had the amazing choice of what he calls it, tomorrow's winners, then why would they go tell the rest of us? So Bertie is like, that's obvious. And then she understands, and this is the part that I thought was really like, amazing that he put this in there. He says she understands the incentives, the weaknesses of humans, the tells that can be recognized when observing human behavior. Mm-hmm. She knows who is quote unquote selling and who can be trusted. In short, she is nobody's fool. Mm-hmm. Now, who in the financial world, I ask you, ever brings up human frailty, weaknesses, incentives, tells, unless you're a behavioral economist? Nobody who's writing a financial letter, this letter is attached to financials, talks about human choices and that we make wrong ones sometimes. I think that's incredible and unique. It's something, if I read this in another letter that's not from Buffett, if, person X, I would start paying a lot of attention to person X.
Well, I got a couple of things out of that paragraph too, and one of them is that Bertie is not investing. I think Bertie does manage her own investments. She makes some investments in the indexes and things like that, but she's not out there buying individual stocks, I don't think.
Well, he doesn't say anything about that. So.
Yeah, so I don't know. What I am kind of want to point out here is that she reads 4 business papers daily, which is what I do. I mean, and I'm a pro. So she's basically taking care of herself by paying attention to the world. Yeah. And that is a prime commandment for doing this kind of stuff.
That's true. That's true. He points that out.
You got to be reading. And second, let me just talk about why you don't want to watch CNBC and make decisions based on what a pundit is saying on CNBC. And I've been on CNBC many times, and you've been on CNBC before. And
people should listen to us. We are the ones telling the truth when we're punditing. But everybody else is wrong. We're the exception.
Buffett has been on CNBC more than anybody. And so you can throw that pie at him too. And
I'm okay with being in his category.
But what he doesn't do is go on there and say, oh, here's the stocks you should be buying.
Right.
So that's a huge difference. When you see somebody on CNBC saying, buy this, sell that, either they're pure entertainment, like Jim Cramer. I like Jim a lot. We've talked about Mad Money here many times. But Jim would admit in a heartbeat, it's so about entertainment. And he's just really, really good at entertaining financial news. And I don't think anybody in their right mind would just go buy stuff because Jim says to buy it. I mean, you have to do your homework and realize that he's coming from a very high level context. He's looking at the forest and saying, okay, this part of the forest looks pretty good, and that company's in that part of the forest, so there you go. So you take it in context. It's entertainment.
He's a great example of somebody who's at a very high level, and for him, it's I don't want to say it's easy, but like it's easier than for somebody else who would try to do what he does on that show. I mean, he's incredible. Yeah. But yes,
let me tell you,
it's total entertainment.
If Jim was snowboarding in Jackson Hole, he could say, yeah, I'm very, very good. He could say that. He could walk that talk because he really is very, very, very good at what he does. So, yeah. So I think otherwise, many, many people get on CNBC and they're basically pitching their book, which is telling you to buy something that oftentimes they're getting ready to sell it. They're looking to pump the price on that thing. Not that different from what the Wolf of Wall Street was doing in these boiler rooms that he was starting, that ultimately resulted in him going to jail. So the sort of pump and dump scheme can be done very sophisticatedly and is done on CNBC every day. And you just go do it.
This is like way off topic, but something that really has been a huge education to me when you look at those people on TV and stuff, just for everybody out there listening who for some reason likes watching financial television, which is like beyond me because it's the worst. But when we went and did CNBC and all the other shows that I don't even remember, which thank you for having us on, CNBC. Please have us on more. Disregard what I'm about to say. It blew me away how much time and work it was to go and do a 4-minute segment on each one of those shows, because we had to get up early. We had to, I had to do makeup. We have to decide what to wear, like get in the car, go to this studio that's either like close by or really far away, get there an hour and a half early, wait around, meet everybody, say hi, do hair and makeup again, talk about what we're going to talk about, prep the questions, and finally get on and do 4 minutes and then say thank you very much and leave and go back. And that's another hour. And next thing you know, it's most of your day for the 4 minutes. And the point of that is not that that's a hard day. It was a great day and super fun. The point of that is, I remember, I don't know if you remember this, but when we did the interview at the stock exchange and we came out, and I couldn't believe how much time that had all taken. And I think you said something like, this person's been on that show and this other person's been on that show. And that was like so cool that we did it. And it was. And I just thought, like, those people you just mentioned run funds, run billion-dollar funds. How on earth do they have time to come and do their hair and makeup and put on their suit and prep their questions and go and talk for 4 minutes? Like, why is that a good use of time? I mean, it was a good use of time for us because we're selling a book. What are they selling?
Exactly.
I could not get over how much time that took. And that somebody running billions of dollars would take that time. I still, to this moment, I don't get it. When I'm running billions of dollars, I will not be doing that, because that seems like a huge waste of time. To go talk my book? No, absolutely not.
Not to talk your book, just to comment on something of, some weighty matter. Because what you're doing is you're keeping your name at that level.
That's right.
And keeping your name in
seriously,
front of the pension
have you
fund
met
managers.
me? Like, am I going to go talk on some weighty matter instead of reading interesting things? No, I'm not.
You'll talk on a weighty matter for you. You'll be up there to say something.
Maybe for me.
You're running
fine. Something I care about.
And you're out there in front of the public because you're always raising money. That's
what I'm saying is, me personally, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to be doing that, because
Warren
I think
Buffett
it's
does it.
such. No, he does not.
Sure he does.
He's not out there
What do you think
doing
he's
his
doing on the
interviews to
air all the
raise
time?
money.
Sure he is.
You think he's trying to raise money? Well, okay, he's supporting Berkshire. That's true.
Absolutely.
Is that the same as raising money?
Sure. You're keeping that stock price up.
I think it's
Absolutely.
more just that people want to hear from him so badly, he'll do one interview a year.
Well, that can also be true. I am in no way taking anything away from Warren Buffett. I mean, obviously, if he had decided he's no longer part of Berkshire Hathaway, people would still want him on there.
Oh, for sure.
And he might actually go do it, once a year. Once a year, once a year, he's about to be. Are you going to come back to the United States to go to Omaha this year?
No, that's too
Speaking
much.
of once a year?
No, I can't.
Yeah.
I can't do that whole thing. Maybe next year. That would be great. But it's just too much for me to do that those days.
I just want to go to meet Bertie.
But I guess my point with relaying that story is that I think about that experience every time I see somebody on financial television talking, who manages money, because I'm just like, what are your priorities? This is insane. But to us watching at home, it just seems like a light little, doesn't take much time kind of thing. And it takes a lot of time. So so when you say when Buffett says Bertie is looking at who is selling and who can be trusted,
right.
That's the kind of stuff I think about. Who's on TV
exactly right.
talking about stuff, taking time to get all dressed up and go down there.
Well, look, we got into about a part of the first page of the letter, and I want to jump down for our next one to where Buffett says what he says in every single letter, and that is defining the kind of company he's looking for. And
where are you dropping down to?
Oh, page 5.
Okay.
Where basically I want to get into this. At Berkshire, we particularly favor the rare enterprise that can deploy additional capital at high returns in the future. So that's something that we haven't talked about a great deal. And I think it's super, super important to understand what that means. So let's get into that next week.
Ooh, way to tee it up. Sweet.
Yeah. Nice, huh?
Highlight that sentence on my PDF. Okay, so I'm following along just like everybody else. Yep, it's page 5 and it's under the heading, What We Do. Second paragraph. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Talk about that next week. Maybe that will inform our weather matrix. You never know.
Ooh, good thought.
Okay, thanks everybody. Bye.
Bye. Hi guys, thanks for listening to InvestED. If you enjoyed this episode and you want more information or to listen to additional episodes, visit our website at investedpodcast.com and sign up for my virtual workshop right there. Spots are definitely limited for this event. I'm not kidding, they really are. They sell out very quickly. So everything discussed on this podcast, by the way, is either my opinion or it's Danielle's opinion. And really important, it's not to be taken as investing advice because I am not your financial advisor, nor have I considered your personal situation as your fiduciary. So remember that. You're on your own here. This podcast is for your entertainment and education only, and I really hope you enjoyed it.